When angels fell from heaven for love, they shattered the very foundations of existence. In a time before history remembers, the Watchers' heaven's most elite guardians glimpsed mortal women laughing in sunlit fields and felt something they had never known: desire. Their forbidden love spawned giants who walked the earth like living mountains, their children caught between divine power and human art. But when their titan offspring began to devour the world, heaven's armies descended with swords of fire and wings of judgment. On the blood-soaked plains of Megiddo, brothers turned enemies as Michael the Archangel faced Samael the Fallen in a war that cracked the sky itself. Yet it was not blade or flame that ended the conflict, but a simple potter's wife who dared to stand between gods and monsters. With trembling hands, she forged a covenant from broken clay and desperate hope, a vessel that could transform violence into virtue, binding the strength of giants to the wisdom of restraint. For 20 generations, peace held by a thread thin as pottery glaze. But when Roman gold tempted mortal hearts and the sacred urn began to crack, the ancient hungers stirred once more. Now 3 bloodlines, human, giant, and angel, must choose between the safety of separation and the perilous promise of unity. Will they forge a new covenant from the ashes of the old, or will the world drown in the flood of their failures? Cloudless eternity stretched over the silver pavements of heaven, where choirs wove sound into light and light into praise. For uncounted ages, the Watchers, an elite order of angels, had stood on the crystal parapets, guarding creation's fragile boundary. Their purpose was as clean as the morning wind: adore, protect, obey. Yet purpose can fracture at a single glance. While surveying the dawn side of earth, the captain of the Watchers, Samuel, paused. Below him, a young potter's wife in the hill town of Arbel laughed as she chased her toddler through spring grass. Her laughter rose like incense, and something inside the captain quivered, a note never struck in heaven's music. So did the Watcher beside him, and another behind, until 30 pairs of immortal eyes were fixed on mortals who had never even sensed the trembling in the sky. Wonder slipped into curiosity, curiosity into hunger. The shift was so subtle no trumpet sounded, no alarm rang. But heaven, for the first time since Lucifer's fall, shivered on its axis. "Look away," whispered the loyal sentinel Rahav. No one did. Desire, unknown to spirits, spiraled downward like pollen. The Watchers found themselves studying mortal routine with the intensity of poets. The way sweat darkened a linen collar, how dusk braided copper through a shepherd girl's hair, how breath fogged in winter and made every word visible, fragile, precious. Each vision carved a little more obedience from their hearts. Within weeks, the Watchers were gathering nightly on the ramparts. They counted freckles, debated eye colors, memorized the cadence of women grinding grain at dawn. Eventually their hymns faltered. Silence replaced the silver chords, for song could not coexist with envy. Their wings, once radiant, dulled to pearl. Rahav petitioned the throne. "Majesty," he pleaded, "the Watchers linger too long on shadows. Command them to avert their gaze. But free will is a blade. Gift or curse depends on the bearer." The decree came: look only upward, and still the Watchers looked down. Samael, tormented by visions of the potter's wife, summoned his comrades to a snow-lit plateau on Mount Hermon. Moonlight glazed their armor. Wind chattered like teeth against their breastplates. "Brothers," he said, "heaven is perfection, yet incomprehensible distance divides us from the one thing we lack: experience. Let us descend, take wives, taste life as they taste it. If judgment falls, may it fall on us together. Swear the oath." One by one, 29 angels placed right hand over heart, left hand to the frozen earth, and swore. The snow did not melt beneath their touch. Ice has no pity. Rahav arrived too late. He watched the last signature burn into the covenant's stone, then tore his robe of light. "You doom yourselves," he cried. Echoes swallowed his warning. At twilight, the Watchers folded their wings tight as spears and plummeted. Comets flared around them. Clouds ripped open. Villagers below mistook the roaring sky for an early storm. When the angels struck earth, the ground sighed, as if welcoming exiles it had secret longed to meet. Beauty became a weapon. The Watchers altered shape, adopting the fairness of men, yet sharpening every feature past mortal possibility. Cheekbones like blades, eyes lit by furnace stars, voices tuned to the note that loosens knees. Wherever they walked, conversations died in throats. Spinning wheels slowed. Dogs forgot to bark. Girls who had once saved their best songs for betrothal night now sang them by afternoon fires, just to see the strangers smile. Mothers warned daughters, priests quoted law, but warning and law are weak against wonder. Samuel found the potter's wife alone by a well. He spoke her childhood nickname knowledge no stranger could possess, and her heart overturned like a jar. When he offered his hand, she did not see the faint scorch on his palm where heaven's gate had branded him exile. She saw only promise. By summer's end, each watcher had chosen a bride. Love, or what masqueraded as love, exploded into festival. Grapes burst on pressed lips. Oil lamps burned until dawn. Stories grew louder, bodies bolder. The angels taught their wives songs that made olive leaves quiver and stones hum. They whispered silver-bright secrets of metallurgy, of root and star, of sigils that opened doors no human must ever open. Knowledge, once caged in crystal libraries, ran feral through marketplaces. With it ran pride. Men who could barely sign their names now etched constellations into swords. Midwives mapped lunar tides and chose birth hours the way kings choose battlefields. Humanity leapt forward a century in a single harvest, while innocence leapt off a cliff. High above, Rav chronicled every lesson, every kiss, every star that flickered as sin thickened the air. He sealed the scroll with tears of salt and flew toward the emerald throne. Judgment rolled behind his wings like thunder. The first kicking of giants, what should have been morning sickness, felt like earthquakes beneath rib and spine. Women cried out in dialects the watchers barely remembered learning. Their voices braided together in a tapestry of dread and awe. The first infant, born under a violet eclipse, measured 3 cubits before his lungs found breath. By age 1 he towered over goats. By 2 the village gates bowed to let him pass. They named him Archean, Awakener, because sleep fled before his footsteps. More giants followed. Lennox, whose laugh cracked cedar trunks. Zira, who could dam a river with one hand. Twin sisters Imrith and Dalma, who sparred with bronze wagons as toys. Their appetites devoured granaries. Their games caved rooftops. Still their angel fathers beamed with something perilously close to pride. Earth groaned under the impossible weight of children forged from rent boundaries. Each sunrise brought longer shadows and gossip of darker things. Archean drinking the life from deer. Imrith demanding hearts instead of dolls. Night fires multiplied across plains where villages once had stood. Rumors in heaven. On the 6th day of the 9th moon, Rahav faced Michael the arch-strategist. The Watchers have sown chaos, Rahav reported. Their offspring split mountains, drink rivers, slaughter without remorse. Humanity is prey in its own cradle. Michael's eyes, ancient as sunrise, narrowed. The Book of Days spoke of this forked path. The lower road leads to flood. So be it, said Rahav. But Michael raised a gauntlet. Not yet. Send me first. Perhaps a sword can sever the root before the rot reaches the trunk. Gather the host. Thus began a march neither heaven nor earth could forget, a glimmering tide of flame as innumerable as desert sand, ascending toward valleys where giants laughed and wives of angels sang lullabies in keys that warped iron. Unbeknownst to Michael, Samuel had tasted visions too, dreams of winged legions and oceans walking upright. He ordered his colossal sons to fortify the mountain passes and sharpen their hunger for war. Cliffhanger. Sunset stained the horizon blood orange on the eve before battle. In a meadow choked with broken millstones, a potter's wife now older, haunted, yet still spellbound watched her Titan child carve galaxies into dirt with a fingertip. She remembered kneeling at the well, the heat of Samal's palm, the vow that had sounded like forever. Overhead, a lone trumpet called. In distant clouds, ranks of fire ignited, moving as one. On lowland cliffs, Nephilim roared in answer, their throats booming like avalanche. Heaven and earth inhaled together, and somewhere between the trumpet and the roar, a single raindrop fell. The raindrop struck ancient stone with the weight of prophecy. Within moments, the sky split open like a torn scroll, releasing torrents that had waited eons for their cue. But this was no ordinary storm. Each droplet carried whispers of judgment, and the wind sang dirges in languages older than Adam's first breath. Michael's descent. Through the tempest came Michael, his 6 wings spread like banners of war. Lightning crowned his brow. His sword blazed with the concentrated fury of 1,000 suns. Behind him marched the seraphim in formation creatures, so terrible that mountains covered their peaks in shame, and seas fled inland to hide. The archstrategist's voice split the thunder. Watchers, your exile ends in chains or ash? Choose. From Mount Hermon's peak, Sam'el emerged, his own radiance dimmed but unbroken. The potter's wife stood beside him, her mortal frame somehow enduring the terrible light that should have reduced her to cinders. Their Titan son Archeon loomed behind them, his shadow falling across entire valleys. "Brother Michael," Samuel called, his voice carrying both sorrow and defiance. "We chose love over law. Would you punish us for learning what heaven never taught, that existence without connection is merely beautiful emptiness?" Michael's eyes burned brighter. "You chose corruption over creation. Look upon your love's fruit." The giants' war council. In the cavern of Machpelah, the Nephilim gathered. These were not the playful children their mothers once knew, but titans whose very presence warped reality. Archeon stood 20 cubits tall, his skin bronze bright, his eyes twin furnaces. Beside him towered Zerah the Earthshaker, whose footsteps had carved the Jordan's new path. The twin sisters Imrith and Dalma flanked the council, their beauty so terrible that flowers withered in their presence, while stars fought to shine brighter. The bright ones descend with fire speech and blade song, rumbled Lennox, whose laughter had once split cedars, but now only brought avalanches. "Do we kneel, or do we teach heaven that earth breeds warriors too?" Archeon's voice shook the mountain's roots. "Our fathers loved unwisely but truly. We are proof that boundaries can birth miracles. If Michael would chain such wonder, let him taste the iron our mother's tears became." The giants raised their weapons, swords forged from meteors, shields carved from glacier hearts, spears that hummed with captured lightning. Yet beneath their bravado flickered something their angel blood could not quite silence, the knowledge that they fought not just heaven's army, but the very architecture of existence itself. The weeping wives. In the valley of Kidron, the mortal wives of the Watchers gathered around fires that burned without wood. Their children had grown beyond embrace. Their husbands spoke increasingly in tongues of silver and storm, and the world itself seemed to recoil from their presence. Sarah, eldest among them and mother to twin giants, spoke first. "I dreamed of white wings torn and falling like snow. I saw our sons buried beneath mountains of judgment. Yet still, she touched her heart. Still, I cannot repent the love that made them." The potter's wife, her name, lost even to herself now. Consumed by the titles men gave angels' brides, whispered, "Samuel promised me forever, but forever has teeth, and they are sharp." Around the circle, other wives nodded. They had gained everything they thought they wanted: beauty that stopped time, knowledge that unraveled mysteries, children who rewrote the very definition of power, but joy had curdled into desperate clinging. Their husbands, magnificent as summer lightning, grew more distant with each passing season, their eyes fixed increasingly on horizons no mortal could see. "Perhaps," whispered Dinah, mother to Lennox, "we loved not angels, but the dream of becoming more than human." And dreams, once realized, die. On the plains of Megiddo, heaven's host met the Nephilim at dawn. The sound was not battle, but symphony. Each clash of weapon rang in perfect harmony, each war cry threaded into a tapestry of inevitable sorrow. Michael's blade met Archeon's meteor sword in a collision that cracked the earth for miles. Sparks became falling stars. Their breath became hurricanes. The giant's strength was enormous. He drove Michael to one knee, pressed with force that should have shattered mountains. But Michael was not mountain. He was principle made manifest, law given form. With a sound like creation's first word, he rose, spun, and opened Archeon's guard. Golden ichor, half divine blood, half mortal tears spattered the battlefield. Around them, the war raged with impossible beauty. Seraphim danced through giant throne boulders. their 12 wings weaving protection around themselves, while their voices sang the very air into weapon and shield. The Nephilim fought with the desperate fury of those who knew their existence was cosmic accident, beautiful and doomed. Zerah the Earthshaker grappled with Raphael the Healer, their struggle carving canyons and raising hills. Where Raphael's hands touched giant flesh, wounds closed, but where Zerah's fists struck angel armor, light itself bruised. The twin sisters Imrith and Dalma fought back-to-back against Uriel the Flame, their movements synchronized from birth, their bronze weapons singing counterpoint to his fire song. But fire is older than bronze, and more patient. High above the battlefield, Samael faced the terrible truth. His children were losing. Not through lack of strength or skill, but because they fought against the very laws that allowed them to exist. Like flames trying to burn water, their rebellion consumed themselves. He thought of the potter's wife, waiting in the caves with the other mortal brides. He remembered her laughter by the well, the way her fingers had trembled when he first spoke her childhood name. Had that moment of wonder been worth the cosmos of sorrow that followed? The answer came not in words, but in action. Samael spread his wings, still beautiful, despite their exile dulled, radiance, and began to sing. Not the precise harmonies of heaven, but something rawer, the song of choices made in darkness, of love that costs everything, a beauty born from broken rules. The song reached his sons on the battlefield below. For one impossible moment, the giants paused in their fighting, remembering smaller days, when their father's voice meant lullabies instead of war cries. Even some of the seraphim faltered, hearing in Samael's melody echoes of the brother they had once known. But Michael's voice rose in countersong pure, merciless, beautiful as justice itself. The two melodies crashed together like opposing tides, and where they met, reality cracked. From those cracks poured something no participant in the war had expected, the voices of unborn generations. Humanity's future children, sensing their bloodline's crisis, cried out from the spaces between moments. Their plea was wordless but clear. Save something. Save anything. Don't let our story end before we can tell it ourselves. The sound struck the combatants like a physical blow. Giants and angels alike staggered, weapons dropping from suddenly nerveless hands. In the eternal mathematics of existence, they glimpsed what their war truly meant. Not just the death of rebels and the restoration of order, but the erasure of infinite possibility. Michael saw cities that would never rise, songs that would never be sung, leaves that would never bloom, because the Nephilim bloodline had been severed from history's root. Archeon saw the faces of mortal children, who might have inherited his strength without his curse protectors instead of destroyers, builders instead of breakers. Even the mortal wives, huddled in their caves, felt the weight of futures collapsing like stars. Their giant children would die today, but in dying would take with them genetic keys that might have unlocked wonders beyond imagining. In that moment of cosmic hesitation, the storm that had been raging since Michael's descent suddenly stilled. Rain hung suspended in mid-air. Lightning froze like bright scars across the sky. The very elements seemed to hold their breath, waiting for anyone, to speak the word that would either save or damn the world. The potter's wife stepped from the cave where she had been hiding and walked onto the battlefield. Her mortal frame should have been crushed by the competing radiations of angel and giant, but love, even broken love, has its own armor. She walked between the frozen combatants until she reached the space where Samael and Michael faced each other, their wings spread in mirror image threat displays. When she spoke, her voice was small, human, fragile as pottery fresh from the kiln. "Enough," she said. "I am tired of being the excuse for your war." A hush rolled across the stalled battlefield, as if the whole world pressed its ear against the potter's wife to hear what one mortal could possibly say to angels, giants, and the very laws of creation. The mother's ultimatum. She lifted a shard of clay, once a jug she had shaped for her son's first water, and held it up between the opposing hosts. "This," she said, voice trembling yet clear, was meant to carry life. Instead, it is smashed by pride. She turned to Michael. "If justice means the end of every child born of wonder, then justice is too small." Then to Samael, And if love demands the deaths of thousands to shield a single vow, then love is too selfish. Her words cracked the suspended rain. Droplets fell again, slow and heavy, each one ringing like a bell against armor and giant skin. Michael frowned, not in anger, but in unfamiliar uncertainty. Samael's eyes filled with a sorrow, older than the mountain beneath him. The giants, hearing their mother speak without a trace of fear, lowered their meteor-forged weapons. The proposal of clay and fire. The potter's wife knelt and pressed the shard into the mud. "Give me one day," she said. "A single turning of the sun. In that span, I will show you a third path, neither slaughter nor rebellion." Michael's sword flared, but he did not strike. "A day will not change decree. It may change hearts," she replied. With a slow nod, the archangel sheathed his blade. "One day. At dawn tomorrow, the host advances. If heaven's mandate is unmet, the flood will come." Samael asked, voice hushed, "What can you forge in a day that scales to eternity?" She smiled, eyes brimming with the stubborn hope of every mother who ever patched a child's torn cloak. "Something small enough for giants to miss, and large enough for heaven to notice." Gathering the fragments. Word spread through ruined villages and shattered passes. "Bring broken things to the riverbank by sunset." Mortals arrived bearing smashed pottery, split plows, cracked toys, harp frames with snapped strings. Even battered helmets taken from fallen seraphim were laid in a growing pile of human ruin. The giants came to Archean, carrying a wheel of millstone size, Imrith and Dalma cradling the splintered trunk of a cedar raised by their own play. Each fragment was testimony to power misused. At twilight, the pile stood taller than any titan and broader than Michael's shining ranks. The potter's wife climbed it until she could see the horizon's last red ember, then raised her hands. "We will melt violence into vessel," she proclaimed. "We will fire grief into grace, the kill of midnight." She directed the watchers to bend their fading glory into heat. Seraphim, reluctant to interfere, found themselves drawn to the spectacle. Their wings formed a dome of living flame above the mound of ruin. Giants knelt, cupping winds in their palms to fan the fire. Mortals fed the furnace with broken idols, snapped spears, uprooted gates. All night the heap glowed, slag and clay swirling into a single molten heart. At its center, the potter's wife shaped an object none could quite see, something both vessel and seed, simple yet impossibly intricate. Her fingers moved with the certainty of destiny's midwife. Rahav, hovering nearby as chronicler, whispered, "She molds possibility itself." By the hour before dawn, the fire dimmed. What remained was a plain urn of river-gray clay, unpainted, unadorned, small enough for a child to cradle. The covenant of breath. The potter's wife set the cooling urn on an altar of basalt. "Inside is emptiness," she announced. "Yet emptiness can be filled with either wrath or mercy. Let each of you breathe into it the thing you most fear losing." First came Lennox the laugher, now somber. He exhaled a rumble of innocent delight, the sound of cedar-splitting laughter reborn as gentle tide song. The urn shimmered. Imrith and Dalma breathed twin sighs of sisterhood without rivalry. Zira offered the hush before a seed breaks soil. Mortals breathed memories of harvest dances and lullabies. Even some seraphim released quiet chords of wonder long buried beneath command. Last came Samael, pressing trembling lips to the rim. He breathed the single heartbeat when he first heard mortal laughter and knew eternity lacked something vital. Light seeped through the clay like dawn through shutters. Judgment at sunrise. As the first ray touched the altar, Michael stepped forward. "What purpose does this vessel serve?" The potter's wife lifted it with both hands. "It is a covenant of restraint. Whoever drinks from it will remember the cost of power. Giants who taste its water will gain strength only when defending, never when dominating. Angels who sip will feel mortal frailty before unleashing might. Mortals will recall wonder before envy." She met Michael's gaze. "Break it, and you choose oblivion. Keep it, and you choose balance." Silence stretched. Then Archean knelt, lowering his great head. "Mother, let me drink first." He sipped. When he rose, his furnace eyes softened to ember. He looked at the battlefield scar he and Michael had carved and began to push fallen stones back into place. Michael watched. Slowly, he drew the tip of his sword across his own palm. Silver-gold blood beaded, and he let a single drop fall into the urn. "Heaven accepts the covenant," he declared. "So long as the vessel endures, flood is stayed." Samael's shoulders sagged in relief and grief. He knew the urn's life would be fragile, as the shard she'd first raised, yet it was more hope than any exile had earned. Threads for tomorrow. By noon, armies dispersed. Seraphins soared homeward, their war song replaced by contemplative hush. Giants gathered stones to rebuild villages they had shattered. Mortals fetched seeds, planting plantings in earth newly rich with ash. At the riverbank, the potter's wife placed the urn in a niche of living rock and sealed it with a kiss. "Watch it," she told Rahav. "Write of it. Remind them all." Rahav etched the moment onto his scroll of tears, then stood sentinel as promised. That night, under a sky washed clean, Samuel approached the potter's wife. No trumpets, no halos, only two beings who had broken the world for love. "I must wander," he said. "Michael's mercy does not erase my oath-bound exile." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Our forever ends here, but its echo may guide others." He left at dawn, wings carrying him into legend. She returned to her humble valley, where giants now build schools from timber they once uprooted in sport. A crack appears, years past. Children mortal, half-blood, and pure giant alike drank from the urn before rites of adulthood. Peace held, but clay, no matter how sacred, is mortal too. One winter morning, Rahav noticed the faintest hairline crack snaking down its side, a reminder that balance requires tending, not merely forging. He inked a final line on his scroll. No covenant survives neglect. Then he flew to find the descendants of angels, giants, and potters, hoping they still remembered how to mend broken things. 20 generations had passed since the potter's wife sealed the covenant urn. Her valley had become a crossroads where pilgrim caravans paused to drink from the sacred vessel, and children born of mixed bloodlines learned to measure their strength against their wisdom. Rahav had chosen his successors carefully descendants who carried threads of all three bloodlines. Miriam bore giant strength in her bones, but potter's patience in her hands. Her son David sang with an angel's voice, yet understood mortal sorrow. Together they tended the shrine, watching over the urn as its hairline crack grew slowly, inevitably, like age lines on a beloved face. Each dawn they would inspect the vessel, trace its flaw with gentle fingers, and whisper the old prayers. Each dusk they would oil the stone niche and trim the eternal flame that had burned since the night of molten fragments. But cracks have their own hunger, and time feeds them well. In the celestial city, a younger generation of angels had taken posts along heaven's walls. These had not witnessed the Great War, knew Samael only as cautionary tale, understood the covenant through scripture rather than scar. To them, the daily reports of Crack's status, stable, became routine as sunrise background noise in eternal duty. Captain Azrael, appointed to Rahav's old position, possessed all the prideful certainty that comes with inherited authority. When his scouts reported unusual stirrings in the borderlands, shadows moving wrong, storms bearing whispers in long dead tongues, he dismissed them as echoes of ancient battles. "The covenant holds," he declared. "The vessel endures. Our vigil is merely ceremonial now." His lieutenant, the young Seraph Nuriel, felt less certain. She had studied the chronicles, traced the mathematical inevitabilities of entropy. "Captain," she ventured, "perhaps we should reinforce the binding while there's time." Azrael's laugh rang like struck bronze. "Reinforce? With what authority do mortals and exiles command heaven's attention? The urn was their solution to their rebellion. Let them maintain it." In the valley below, the families of mixed heritage faced their own crisis. Generations of intermarriage with purely mortal stock had diluted the angel-giant bloodline until only whispers of power remained. The descendants could still sense the urn's condition, feel it like an ache in old bones before rain, but few possessed strength enough to mend it. Sarah the younger, great-granddaughter of giants, could lift stones that broke ordinary backs, but her touch lacked the fire needed to fuse clay. Marcus, who carried faint watcher blood, could hear the urn's wordless song, but his mortal hands shook when he tried to channel healing light. Worst of all, the outside world had changed. New kingdoms rose beyond the valley, ruled by kings who saw the shrine not as sacred trust, but as curiosity for conquest. Merchants brought tales of distant lands, where different gods commanded worship, where the old stories of fallen angels were dismissed as provincial superstition. "Who will remember," whispered Miriam as she traced the crack now wide as a grain of barley, "when we are gone?" Titus Marcellus came with scrolls of legal parchment and a purse heavy with gold. Tall, clean-shaven, wearing the crimson-edged toga that marked him as Rome's cultural acquisitor, he moved through the valley shrine with the calculating eye of one who measured history by its market value. "Fascinating," he murmured, examining the urn through a magnifying lens crafted in Alexandria. "Mesopotamian styling, but the clay composition suggests local origin. The flamework is unusual, primitive, yet somehow sophisticated." David stepped protectively closer to the altar. "It is not for sale, Ramon." Marcellus smiled, the patient expression of one accustomed to resistance. "Everything is for sale, young peeper. The question is merely price. Consider, in my villa, your relic would be preserved for centuries. Scholars would study it, artists would immortalize it. Here, ... He gestured at the modest shrine, the worn stone walls. Here it crumbles into obscurity. He did not see the crack. Mortal eyes, no matter how educated, could not perceive the fault that ran deeper than clay, through the very foundations of the covenant itself. That night, Marcellus returned with a cohort of legionnaires and a train of gilded wagons. The gold he offered could have fed the valley for a decade, bought protection from the bandits, who increasingly plagued the trade routes, secured dowries for every maiden within 50 miles. The valley elders gathered in torch-lit council. Old Abraham, whose grandfather had sipped from the urn in its first decade, spoke for tradition. Some things are not ours to sell, only to guard. But younger voices disagreed. Guard it for whom? Demanded Thomas the merchant. Our children drift to the cities. Our bloodlines weaken. Soon there will be no one left who even understands what we protect. Miriam stood at the debate's heart, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles showed white. She could feel the urn singing its distress, a note like wind through broken harps. The crack had widened again during Marcellus's examination, responding to his touch like infection to fever. "If we sell," she said quietly, "the covenant breaks." "I feel it as surely as I feel my own heartbeat," Thomas scoffed. "Old woman's superstition. It's clay and flame, nothing more. Fear won. Not fear of divine wrath, but fear of poverty, irrelevance, the slow fade into historical footnote. When the vote was tallied, 17 voices favored the sale, 9 stood against. Marcellus received the news with satisfied nod. "Excellent. My artisans will arrive tomorrow with proper packing materials. The vessel will travel to Rome wrapped in silk and cushioned with swan down." But that night, as darkness pooled in the valley's corners, the crack split wider than any barley grain. It ran now from rim to base, and through it leaked something that was neither light nor shadow, but the space between choices, the residue of paths not taken. Miriam knelt before the altar, pressing her weathered hands against the stone. "Forgive us," she whispered to powers she could no longer name. "We have forgotten how to be worthy of miracles." As Marcellus's craftsmen prepared their silk wrappings, strange phenomena rippled through the valley. Milk soured at noon. Wells gave up water that tasted of copper and regret. Children woke screaming from dreams they could not remember but would not forget. Most disturbing of all, the giant's blood began to sing again. In the neighboring hills, the descendants of Archaon and his kin felt ancient strength stirring in their bones, not the gentle, protective power the covenant had promised, but the old hunger for dominance. Marcus found he could crush stone with his bare hands. Young Rebecca discovered she could command ravens to carry messages written in languages that predated Babel. The covenant was not merely cracking, it was inverting. The vessel that had once transformed violence into virtue now leaked corruption back into bloodlines that had spent centuries learning restraint. High above, Nuriel felt the shift like a sword through her ethereal flesh. She burst into Azriel's crystal chamber, her 12 wings blazing with urgent light. "Captain, the covenant fails. I sense the old hungers rising, the bindings torn." Osriel waved dismissively. "Impossible. Our instruments show no." He stopped, staring at the golden astrolabe that tracked cosmic balances. Its needles spun wildly, unable to find their center. Deep in its crystalline heart, hairline fractures spread like frost on winter glass. For the first time in 20 generations, the captain of the Watchers felt afraid. "Sound the assembly," he whispered. "Send word to Michael. The Covenant ... His voice caught. The Covenant dies. In the valley shrine, Miriam spent her final vigil with the urn. She had dismissed the Roman guards, sent the craftsmen away, claiming need for one last ceremony before the vessel's departure. They had grumbled, but complied. What harm could an old woman do in a single night? She knew exactly what harm she intended. As midnight approached, she lifted the cracking urn with trembling hands. The fissure now split it nearly in two. Only stubborn clay and the memory of sacred breath held the pieces together. "Potter's wife," she whispered to the ghost of legend. "You began this with broken shards. Perhaps breaking is the only way it ends." Above her, storm clouds gathered without wind to summon them. Below, the earth trembled as sleeping giants dreamed of war. Under a sky stilled by portent, Miriam stood before the cracked urn at the shrine's heart. Legionnaires slept in careless ranks beyond the circle of eternal flame. In the hush she raised the vessel above her head, as though offering the world its very soul. With a resolute breath, she let it fall. The urn splintered on the basalt altar, shards scattering like frozen tears across the stone. From its core, a pulse rippled outward, neither light nor darkness, but the memory of every breath once exhaled into that slender vessel. The sound was a single note of perfect resonance, then silence deeper than grief. Shocked murmurs rose from hidden watchers, as the 3 descendant lines felt the echo in their veins. Angels, perched on heaven's ramparts, sensed the Covenant's death before instruments could register imbalance. Giants, roused by the prism of unleashed power, stirred in their caves. Mortals, who had tended the flame for generations, fell to their knees, trembling against an ancient sorrow. From the hills descended Archaeon's last living heir, Neria of the Storm, giant-born yet tempered by human mercy. At the same moment, Nuriel the Seraph slipped through the veil between worlds. Her silver wings folded as humility, not pride, guided her steps. She bent beside Miriam, gathering clay-streaked shards in her great hands. Together, giant, angel, and human, they formed a trembling circle around the broken urn. Neria pressed her palm to the largest fragment. Nuriel laid her forehead against the rim. Miriam inhaled the cold night air, then exhaled memories of every time the vessel had bound strength to restraint. "But let us vow never again to forsake each other's voice. Let the vessel die if we cannot honor its promise," Miriam whispered. Instead, the rings would be borne by one chosen from each line, human, giantial, to meet at the shrine whenever shadows rose too close. At dawn, as the first light brushed the valley, the 3 heirs rose with their covenant, to rebuild not an urn, but a living pact woven through 3 realms. They gathered clay from the river as azureth both, mortal and giant had touched, while Nuriel taught them the angel song of binding. Each melody wove a strand of humility into the clay, forging seeds of promise rather than shards of power. They crafted 3 simple rings, one of terracotta warmed by human hearth, one of marble imbued with giant blood, and one of glass wrought in the Seraphin's forge. And warning, true treasures are not sold for gold, but lived in trust. No vessel would ever hold power again. Soldiers of Rome, roused by the thunder of divine tumult, found the urn broken, and the rulers of the valley standing in solemn council. They pledged. Marcus the Keeper stepped forward, ring in hand. He offered it to Titus Marcellus as a gesture of peace. Marcellus, his scholars at heel, knelt before the 3 heirs and swore fealty not to empire, but to the valley's renewed oath. He departed the next dawn, leaving silk-wrapped weapons behind, carrying only the report that such a covenant belonged neither to Rome nor heaven alone, but to every beating heart. Word spread beyond empires and firmaments that a new covenant stood where the old had fallen. No shrine preserved its fragments. Instead, every child carried a simple clay bead at a cord about their neck, reminder that balance is born from brokenness and rebuilt by shared hands. A lone shard of the ancient urn appears at the river's edge, washed clean by currents of mercy, waiting for new hands to shape its promise once more. Pilgrims mortal, giant kin, and even humble angels traveled to the valley to witness the inaugural sharing of the rings beneath an ancient olive tree, to temper power with compassion, to honor wonder before envy, to speak across differences before weapon raised. In that place, children of all three lineages played without fear, their laughter weaving new song into the air. Years later, generations remembered the cracked urn only as legend. Miriam, Neria, and Nuriel passed into their own stories, but their rings remain, entrusted to a council that meets beneath the olive each equinox. When quarrels flare or pride stirs, the three rings are brought forth, terracotta, marble, and glass, each empty, but for the promise they carry. And sometimes when the wind is still, and the moonlight silver as broken pottery,